common misconception. They have the game in Japanese to then translate into English. We're there from the beginning, before they even have the game. Final Fantasies 1 through 6, I had to start playing them many times. Really get as familiar as possible with all of the different iterations. I got the opportunity to actually sing Final Fantasy XIV. As I understand, there was a bit of a time crunch. They were like, is there anybody in the office that we can call on and ask? Gave it a try, and
hello, and thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, subscribing is the best way to support us. It helps us grow and bring you new stories from life in Japan. All right, let's jump in. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we are welcoming Paula in the studio. Thank you so much for coming.
thank you for inviting me.
You're a localization lead for the English versions of a lot of games at SQUARE ENIX.
Yes, thank you.
But you also do the voice acting for quite a few of them and perform some of the iconic songs from franchises that people all over the world know. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And I want to kind of know a little bit how you got into this in the first place. And maybe before you even got into SQUARE ENIX, what brought you to Japan?
Well, like so many other people, I was definitely into anime and that kind of thing back in the States. My parents also were big movie buffs. They really liked all the Ghibli movies. And so from a young age, I started watching those. And then I found out that they were originally in Japanese, and I got really interested in listening to them in their original language. So from the age of about 9 or so, I started kind of gradually trying to teach myself Japanese. It was very slapdash, and I wasn't great at it, obviously, but like starting from then, I started teaching myself until college, and then I majored in Japanese with the intent to go to Japan and actually work there if I could. And I managed to get into the JET program. So I taught English for 2 years here in Japan in Gunma Prefecture. But the problem with doing English teaching is that they really want you to speak English all the time. And what I had come to Japan for was to get better at Japanese and kind of immerse myself in the language especially. So I decided to leave after 2 years and moved to Tokyo and started translating for mobile games at first. And then eventually that led me to working at SQUARE ENIX.
You said a lot of really interesting things. And the first of them that I want to get back to was that you kind of started studying by yourself.
Yes.
At a very young age.
Yeah.
And you kind of already built the plan of going to Japan at the time. What was it that attracted you so much to the language or the country when you're so young and maybe you haven't really thought about all the aspects of what it may be like to live in Japan?
I think it really was just the sound of the language. I've always really liked just the sound of hearing people speak in different languages. People in my family we've all learned second languages, not necessarily fluently, but we've all like dabbled in various languages. My dad speaks some German. My grandmother was a Spanish teacher in high school, or as a high school Spanish teacher. And so I just found a language other than English very interesting to learn and kind of fiddle around with and try to become better at pronouncing and all of those things. So I think it was just the language that made me kind of go, I got to go to the place where they speak it.
Was it difficult for you to switch from many years of self-studying and to go into college and suddenly have a sort of like formal education, but that may follow a rigid kind of teaching structure?
Yes. I found out that basically I had taught myself some things pretty well and some things absolutely terribly. I couldn't write at all. Because I was teaching myself out of books and textbooks or manga, even just like reading and trying to copy things down. My writing was terrible. I had what's a stroke order, I couldn't figure out kanji. I was really, really bad at everything that had to do with writing. But listening, I was very good at. If anybody was speaking to me in Japanese, I would understand what they were saying. But the kind of book learning how to write it, learning how to read it. I was also not great at reading the kanji. until somebody would like read it out loud. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, that word, got it. So yeah, I found out that I was lacking in several important aspects of the Japanese language.
But at that time, you still hadn't been to Japan.
No. Well, I went for just a 10-day stretch when I was in high school. We had a sister city with the city that I lived in, and it was with Wakayama City.
Oh, okay.
And so they kind of got together a group of high schoolers and brought us over to Japan.
This is so unique in high school to get to do that.
Yeah, but just for 10 days, we had to pay our own way, but they kind of like helped organize it with the other people that were involved in the Sister City program. And so I did get to go a little bit and be like, yeah, this is great. I want to come back. So,
but the first longer trip was when you went with the JET program and you went to Gunma.
I also studied abroad for 1 year in college. So I also got to test it out there. I did like little dip my feet in before
committing in a way.
Before my parents were like, okay, we understand you do want to go and stay. I think they appreciated that I went for that one little 10-day trip. And then I went for the year trip for study abroad. And then still wanted to go, and they're like, okay, you've tried it out enough, go for it.
When you went with the JET program to Gunma, so Gunma, northwest of Tokyo, a little bit quite a rural prefecture. It's not a place that I think many people go to, whether it's for tourism or for living. How was your experience kind of arriving there? Which city were you with the program? Shibukawa
City. Very close to Ikaho. They had kind of just combined into one kind of city area at the time when I got there. It's beautiful. I grew to really appreciate like onsen and that kind of thing after I moved there. Up until then, I was very kind of hesitant, but in Gunma, like onsen are a really big thing and they're gorgeous. So I really got into it. From there, it was very rural. I had to have a car. I bought a car while I was there. I had gone assuming I wouldn't need to because when I studied abroad in Tokyo, tons of trains, tons of public transportation everywhere. And then I got to Gunma and I was like, okay, I'm ready. And they're like, well, how are you going to get anywhere? You don't have a car. You should buy a car. So I did. And I got my Japanese driver's license and everything too. But it did definitely feel like a little bit like moving to somewhere similar. So my not my hometown, but where my family ended up for my dad's job is also kind of rural. Lots of farming country in kind of central California. And so moving to Shibukawa in Gunma felt kind of like moving to the same city, but in Japan. Which I think was also a reason why I went, all right, 2 years here, and then I think I'm going to move on and go somewhere else.
When you kind of grow up and you learn the language and you get so fascinated by manga or anime and you kind of build up this dream of moving to Japan, you might kind of associate the country with a lot of things that may not necessarily be true when you actually come and move there. What was your experience like when you kind of really experienced this for a longer stretch of time and you got to be where you had dreamt to be for so long?
I mean, again, I think it helped that I had kind of like dipped my toes into being in Japan a couple times before I came to live for good. So I think I came at it fairly clear-eyed. I knew that it wasn't going to be perfect. I knew that it wasn't just going to be like, I get to Japan and I suddenly become a translator, which was why I was like completely fine with doing the JET program for a couple years, kind of making sure that I could live comfortably and get around and know what I was doing a little bit before moving on to the translator aspect and deciding to move into Tokyo proper and just kind of building my life here in Japan instead.
But the goal and the dream was then to get into translation and to kind of get into that industry.
I wanted to do something with the language. Like whatever it was, I needed it to have to do with the language.
So how did you end up getting that first opportunity to kind of dip your toes into that industry and work on, I think you mentioned the first few games as well, mobile games?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get hired at it was like an outsourcing company that would put translators in places, and they put me at a mobile game company, and I got to translate a few of their mobile games from Japanese into English. I had passed N1, luckily, which I think was the kind of like what made that company take a chance on me. And I feel very lucky that I got to do that, because it really was just good timing. I got there at a time when they were looking for translators and went, I could probably do it. I think so. And moved on from there.
How is that industry kind of structured? You've been in there for a while now, and now you work for Square Enix. So in a way, you're like in-house.
Yes.
But you just mentioned that your first job was an outsourcing company that placed you somewhere. If you could give us an overview now with your experience working in translation for a while, what does the situation look like? How do these companies all work? The game production companies, the localization company, these outsourcing companies?
Right. So when I first got into translation, it was during kind of the mobile game bubble. And they were looking for as many people as possible that could translate the millions of Japanese mobile games that were coming out into English, so they could hopefully get people overseas to get hooked and start playing all of the mobile games that were coming out of Japan. And so I think because of that, a lot of kind of fledgling translators got opportunities, like me. And then since then, the bubble kind of, I would say, deflated a little bit. Maybe not burst, but deflated a little bit. And mobile games really aren't as big of a thing. But as far as moving into in-house translation, it really was just, I had that little bit of experience doing the outsourced company translation. I took on some freelance translation jobs too, around the same time, just kind of trying to find little bits and pieces of whatever I could. And I guess my resume looked good enough that I got in to be an in-house translator, where I really do just work at the company, for the company.
Do most companies translate in-house, or would they generally outsource for the majority of it?
You know, it's hard for me to talk too much on other companies' procedures, but from what I understand, it's a lot more common for them to hire outsourced translation companies or outsource freelancers to work on the video games, and it's rare to have an in-house translation team. Sometimes there will be in-house editing teams where the person will kind of be in charge of the localization, but they'll be getting the translations from other people and then kind of like reworking them and making sure they fit in the game that they're working on. But we kind of do all of that in-house. Not that we don't use freelancers or freelance or translation vendors. We do sometimes if it's like a large enough project. But we have core teams of multilingual people working in-house at Square Enix.
What was your experience like at this first translation job? I mean, video game translation and localization, I would say from the little small experience I have myself, having done a part-time job in that industry, it's quite different than translating a novel or an article. There are a lot of things to take into consideration.
Yes.
What was it like when you kind of first worked and you suddenly had your first game that you had to localize?
I very luckily had some other people working with me that were kind of able to teach me what we were doing and give me a bit more of a like, okay, be careful. You can't have your words be too long. We've only got this much space that we're allowed to use. So, you know, choose your words wisely when you're translating these things. These are the things you got to think about while you're doing the games. So, I mean, it's thanks to those mentors basically while I was working that taught me the proper things to think about while translating. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to dig deeper a little bit into this because when players get the game and then get to experience it, it's available publicly, and players may have a lot of opinions on those translations.
Oh, yes.
But they don't necessarily have the full context of all the things that you have to consider when you translate
Right.
the game. So especially we're talking about Japanese games here, right? So the original language is always going to be Japanese.
Yes.
What is the first challenge for you when you approach a text and you have this game to translate to turn it into the English version?
First off, a common misconception actually is that when it comes time to translate a game, they have the game in Japanese and they're giving you a Japanese game to then translate into English.
Oh.
With at least with us at Square Enix, we're there from the beginning before they even have the game. They have an idea of a game and they are writing it concurrently with while we're trying to translate it. So it's really taking place at the same time. And because of that, when we come up with questions or, we look at a phrase that we've been given or some text that's going to go on a menu screen somewhere, we can directly ask the people who wrote that because they work, next to us in the company, be like, okay, so where is this going to be on the menu? How much space are you giving us? Like, have you considered making this font a little bit bigger because it's going to be kind of hard to read if we have to write like a big long word instead of you just writing like one kanji on there. So kind of while the game is getting developed, we can give our suggestions to make things easier on players that are going to be playing it in other languages, as well as just ask for extra context and that kind of thing. Because if you are just looking at text, you're not going to have half of the context that's necessary to understand what's actually going on in the game.
But it must be quite difficult if you don't even have the version of the game or the raw version of the game, just translating a script, right?
Right. Or with like extra images. We'll be given like, I don't know, planning sheets, basically. Like we're expecting to add this functionality into the game. And here's kind of a rough idea of what that's going to be. Now translate it. So we'll get some of those spec docs, that kind of thing as well, to kind of help us on our way. But yes, we are kind of flying blind for half of the experience, because we're trying to write it at the same time they're trying to write it. Yeah.
So that's the first misconception. You sometimes don't even have the game and you're just translating based on a Japanese script.
Right.
One point that you brought up a couple of times now is space.
Yeah.
So there will be maybe text bubbles or a menu size, and you have to limit your translation translated text to how that fits. And Japanese is usually shorter. Yeah. How does it work for them when they plan this and have to consider different languages? Because Japanese is going to be shorter, English might be a bit longer, but other languages might be even longer.
Yes.
So how do they balance? Because you're a localization lead for English, so you'll have your requirements, but then maybe, I don't know, localization lead for Italian or so will be like, hey, well, I need some
German tends to be the longest. So most of the time, we kind of have set suggestions that we can give the development teams when they come to us with like, hey, can you help us put this game that we're planning into all of these other languages? We'll be like, yeah, sure. Have you considered space? Have you considered dialogue lengths? Like, do you need us to have the spoken English match the same length as the spoken Japanese? Do you have you considered using pictures and things instead of writing out text? Because sometimes you can use like a pictograph of something instead, and then we won't have to worry about space limitations. So we'll kind of give them all of those suggestions at the start of the project, which helps a lot. And then if they have any questions, they'll ask us as well, and we can ask questions back, which, will happen sometimes when we're getting something and we're like, whoa, there's no way, that's not going to fit. Or they'll be like, yeah, translate this in 3 characters. And you're like, no.
This, what you're talking about right now, is possible because you work in-house and the developers are next to you. Yes. What's it like when you're not in-house and you're part of these agencies that are kind of hired, where you're a localization team, you probably have, I don't know, a person in charge, a localization lead that might be in contact or may not be in contact directly with the client. On the client side, it might also not be directly the developers. It might be a representative. So how does this then work? Is it just the same but like very slow and very long?
it still sort of depends on who you're working with. Because let's see, in my experience, I've had some jobs where when I was freelance, I would just be given a bunch of text and they're like, all right, here's the setting, here's the style that we want. And we'll have kind of a meeting about that. But then they'll just be like, give me the text when you're done. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh, well, here you go. And they go, thanks.
And that's it.
And that's like the only thing you hear. So, you know, your text might not even be used. Maybe you have no idea because there's like another person that's in charge of it. Or that person that's in charge of it might be taking yours as a base, but then they're kind of like editing bits and pieces of it and putting it into the game that way. So I think it's a lot grayer. It's less opaque if you're working freelance or working with a vendor instead. Just because somebody on the end, on the developer's side, the people that are actually creating the game will basically take your text and do something with it, but you are not involved in that process, which is kind of why I really like working at Square Enix next to the people who are actually making the game, because then you can actually see what's happening to it and the final product in the game.
So this is quite important, I think, not only working on translating the script, but actually seeing how it is in the game.
Yes.
I remember I was also working on a mobile game, and they were pretty fast because they were releasing updates all the time. They would give us something to localize, and we had to localize it, give it back to them. And the next day they had it already implemented in the game. And we actually had to play the game to see if the text would appear properly and not be cut off and whatnot.
Yep.
In a sort of beta or closed loop circuit, which can be also quite challenging.
Yeah.
But do you go all the way to that stage, I imagine, to kind of test and see and still make modifications after everything has been implemented in the game?
Yes. If you're working on an in-house project at Square Enix, you're there from the beginning of the project, all through the actual translation, through the voice recording, through the implementation, and then the QA as well. And then also, we're usually there to do a bunch of extra stuff like press releases or helping with marketing blurbs and stuff that's coming out. So we kind of, once you're put on a project, you're with it the whole time. So in the Q&A, the quality assurance time, that's when you get to look at the game, read the thing and go, uh-oh, it's got half the words missing. Oh no, I've got to make that much shorter. And that's when you get all of those bugs come up that you get to fix, hopefully, and then in the end get a much better product.
There are some translations that I would imagine are quite obvious or easy to do. Some that have been, like, let's say, menus maybe that have been done in so many games that there are a lot of references you can copy. And so what are some of the difficult decisions you have to make as a localization lead that you have to actually spend time on thinking, how do we translate this? Or how do we make this work? Or maybe how do we convey the meaning?
I mean, I think that's the entire job, really. But the first thing that comes to mind is names of characters and places, and even sometimes like objects or attacks or whatever that are in the game. In my experience, those types of things are usually written earlier on. And so sometimes you'll be kind of waiting for the actual game text to come in. But in the meantime, they'll give you a bunch of like, here are some weapons that we're thinking of adding into the game. Translate these. And then you kind of have to be like, okay, where are you getting this katakana name from? and can you tell me more about like why you guys chose this name, so that I can kind of get an idea of what style to translate it into. And the same thing goes for like names of characters. Sometimes they'll pick some sounds for names that sound good in Japanese, but then when you kind of like try to put it into English characters, it maybe sounds a little off, or it sounds too much like another word. And so you'll have to kind of go back and forth with the developers and be like, well, I think this name might not work very well for English, so what if we change it to this a little bit? Still close, but different enough that it would work better in an English-speaking country. What do you think? And that's usually kind of like an early on process that we do with the developers as we go.
You gave an interesting example, and where does this katakana name come from?
Yeah.
Where you would assume a katakana word usually actually comes from an overseas world originally.
Sometimes.
So does this happen a lot where you suddenly have a word that actually doesn't really have any English foundation or any foreign language foundation, and you have to somehow retranslate it back, so to say?
So sometimes, I would say more often, it's that people are pulling from Greek mythology or Norse mythology, and they're trying to use like names of obscure gods, and they think that it sounds really cool. But when you look at it in katakana, as an English speaker, I might just be like, okay, hang on, where did this come from? Or, first thing that you do is probably you take that name, you Google it really quick to see like, okay, does a Wikipedia come up that says this is a Norse god?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not as, knowledgeable about that kind of thing. I find that I usually will try to look everything up just in case. And then if I really can't figure out what the katakana name came from, I will ask just to make sure that I'm not off track, that kind of thing. Yeah.
What kind of timelines are we kind of talking about when you mentioned you start working with the developers before the game is even ready until you are at this kind of Q&A and final stage and the game is being released?
It depends on how big the game is. If it's a smaller title, sometimes it'll just be 2 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a bigger title, it can be many years.
So I imagine you have multiple projects at once on rotation and you kind
of
switch.
Yes. I would say I was put on several smaller projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would actually be working on several games at the same time, or at least like assisting on some games while working on other games. And also a lot of our projects will be at different points in the production cycle. So maybe right now, this game needs an extra helper to be translating stuff because they have a lot of text to work on. But my main project that I'm working on is still in kind of the early stages. So I'm just working on the naming of the stuff and figuring out what the world is like and that kind of thing. So I have time to help out with that other one. I think that's another part of being in-house helps, because then you can kind of get some of your teammates from another one to help out on another thing when there's time. And we're kind of able to distribute the work a little bit better. But for the people that are working on really big projects, usually it'll just be that.
Wow.
Because they won't have time. They won't have time for anything else besides the AAA game that they're working on.
When you are translating, you're in charge of English, but do you have to work a lot with the translators from other languages so that across all the, let's say, international translations, there is a sort of consistency with names, or it doesn't matter? One example that comes to mind, I think, would be in Pokemon, the I think in English, Ash Ketchum, I think.
Yes.
But he has different names in different countries all over the place, and I had no idea he was called Ash in English until I started learning English myself. But do you have to consider these, that or it doesn't matter, and like each language should do something that matches their culture or their linguistics and market?
It matters a bit per language, but it also matters per game. Because there are some developers who feel very strongly about having consistency. All characters are going to be named this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have other games that are more like, no, you can make it natural feeling for whatever your country is. We want the players overseas to feel, that it's the most natural version of it. And so it depends. But usually we're still in talks with everybody that's localizing in-house, at least. So the other languages can see what English is doing and decide whether they like that idea or whether they're like, no, we don't like the spelling of that thing. We should spell it this way so that it makes more sense in our language. We try to have as much freedom to be as natural as possible, I would say. But sometimes you do get the developers who really want things to be the same. Even in Japanese, they'll want the Japanese to match the English, to match the Italian, to match the German, etc. Usually there's talks at the beginning of the project to make sure that everybody's aware that they want everything to be the same.
outside of the video game industry, there are kind of conventions for how Japanese should be translated to English. Are those generally followed, or do you kind of have like each company chooses their own way of translating? Examples of words come to me, like from Mount Fuji-san. Do you say Mount Fuji, or do you say Fuji-san, or is there like a rule that is applied, let's say, just by Square Enix on these, or is it like a general convention amongst the translation industry?
I'd say there are trends. Within Square Enix, we do have some rules, like we'll have style guides, where, you know, if you are writing in English, then you have to use these types of punctuation. You always make sure you've got the Oxford comma, for instance. So we've got those kinds of writing conventions that we do have as a basis, like we want all games to match this way. But as far as terminology goes, I would say that the trend that I tend to see is if the setting is Japan, it will use a lot more Japanese-y words. More people will tend to use some of the same thing, like they'll say senpai instead of like, oh, my upperclassman or whatever, if the setting is in Japan. But I would say that for Square Enix games, we tend to do very fantasy-related games that aren't set in any real-world country. And in those cases, we are not necessarily married to, we're going to have to call this person something-san because that's what they said in Japanese. We tend to go for natural again. So depends on the setting. Japanese setting, you're more likely to get loaner words. Fantasy setting, you're more likely to get something just completely different and original to that world.
When you get into that industry, I imagine that you also like to maybe play games yourself, and you maybe dream of translating certain specific games. Did you have some that you kind of, as you got more and more into it, you're like, I hope one day I can work on this kind of game?
Well, so when I started out translating, I liked games, but I wouldn't have called myself a gamer at the time. I played video games. I enjoyed video games, but it wasn't like my main hobby. I was much more into anime and manga and stage plays and just singing and that kind of thing. But then after working at Square Enix for a while, I played a ton of games. And now I play many games, and I would consider myself a gamer now. But I would say that when I first started at Square Enix, all of my previous experience had been with translating mobile games. And I was mostly just excited to do something that wasn't a mobile game. I'm like, put me on a console game. I can't wait to try something. Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, put me on something. And so, of course, the first thing that they gave me was another mobile game when I first got to Square Enix. And so that was a little bit of a letdown. But since then, I have been able to work on console games. So that was good.
Does this actually make a difference when you translate, that you have to consider where and how the game is going to be played, like based on like the screen size of the console? Do you have to?
I mean, yeah. Usually those things are taken care of on a programming side more so than on our side, but it does still matter. Like if you're going to be playing a game on a tiny little screen, then you really don't want to be writing stuff that's going to have to be the tiniest font so that you can fit it all onto the screen. So you do have to think about it. Yeah, and console games are definitely, you have more space, you have more, it's more of a complete story, I would say. And as you mentioned before, like for mobile games, they'll often have lots of small little updates that happen frequently. And so I feel like those don't end as often. And I like having the complete story available when you're doing a whole game that's going to be on a console.
And eventually that opportunity came about, and you got to work on the Final Fantasy series.
I did.
The pixel remastered games, multiple, 6 of them, I think it was.
Yep. All at once.
Tell me how that was like. You're working at Square Enix. Do you get called into a meeting like, okay, so now we have this new game that has been decided. We want you to work on this, and you were suddenly like, okay, wow, this is Final Fantasy.
Yeah, pretty much. It was sort of a conversation with my manager, like, hey, okay, so this thing's coming up. We're thinking of putting you as the lead. It's going to be the first 6 Final Fantasy games, remastered, not completely redone or anything, not like some of the other like HD games that have come out, but more of a going back to the classic, but creating it for a modern audience that can then play it on like the Switch or just something easier. Basically I got the call and they're like, you free? I'm like, I guess so. So it was exciting and scary at the same time.
Yeah, I'm curious about the scary part a little bit, because Final Fantasy is like the franchise from Square Enix that people all around the world have played and have a lot of expectations for. And we've seen what the fans have to say when expectations are not always met, or maybe they have different opinions of how things should have been done. How do you approach a project like this? You're certainly responsible for this. You know that this is going to be played by many people all over the world. Maybe if you play on a smaller mobile game, you never really know how many people are actually going to interact with it. But in this case, it's got
people would definitely play this one.
Yes. So how was it? How do you approach the project? And you mentioned 6 at once is like a big thing.
Yeah. I mean, first things first, I played through them many times, just trying to really get a feel for everything that was going on in the games. I mentioned before, I wasn't a gamer back in my youth, so I actually had not played Final Fantasies 1 through 6 when I got given the project. So I had to start playing them and really get as familiar as possible with all of the different iterations as much as I could. The nice thing, I guess, for me is that really, at this point, those games have been worked on a lot. They've gone through many different translations, and they've been fine-tuned each time. And really kind of at the point that we got the project, there were some really good finished translations out there already of many of the games that were just perhaps a little bit outdated or didn't match our style guides anymore. And so they needed to be updated in those kinds of ways. But they were really well done games already that I mostly just needed to kind of dust off and brush up and put back out the door, I'd say.
You mentioned some of the translations being a little bit outdated. I imagine when the games came out originally and nowadays, socio-political situations have changed across the globe. Are those then considerations that you have to take when you translate certain phrases that may not age too well, or kind of nowadays be like, okay, no, you can't say this anymore?
Some. Again, luckily, these games kind of were already, they'd been brushed up along the way since they came out in the, late 80s. Early 90s, etc. So there weren't too many egregious things that we needed to kind of take another look at. So even the Japanese was looking at their text and trying to make sure, like, is this good for now? Yeah.
Do you often, or in these situations, do you try to approach this and give the text where needed a sort of modern interpretation, or do you want to try to stick to the original text as much as possible?
For Final Fantasies 1 through 6, we really wanted to keep it as classic as possible. They are very beloved games. We knew going into it that, like, the point of the Pixel remasters wasn't to radically redo them. It was just to take what people had enjoyed in their youth and bring it to people nowadays that could play it, for their kids could play it, and everybody can kind of enjoy the same storyline from different generations. So the point of the Pixel remasters was really just to bring what was already beloved back to the masses. I'd put it that way.
How long did that project last?
I think several years. It caught us in the middle of COVID as well. Like I had started to work on it before COVID, and then we kind of had to complete it in the middle of COVID.
Okay.
So, but still several years, even just for something that was a remaster. So yeah,
You
long
said
process.
you kind of went through the games yourself to discover the franchise and see what the story had to say. Do you have a favorite one now that you kind of played them, I think, probably multiple times?
Yeah. So I have two favorites for two reasons. I like Final Fantasy III because that was actually the one that I got to translate from scratch. And so I actually really enjoyed working on Final Fantasy III just because it was sort of like, ooh, this is a story that people know in some ways, but they haven't actually seen this version of the story. And getting to bring that to life was really, really fun. But then for just pure playing it, I had a lot of fun, was Final Fantasy IV. I really, really liked the story for Final Fantasy IV. I had a ton of fun with that one. And just getting to know all of the classic lines and story twists and turns that they reference so often in a bunch of other media. Final Fantasy IV is referenced everywhere in other Square games and stuff too. So I was really excited to play through that one.
If someone hasn't played the series and is curious to get into it, what approach would you recommend them to have? Should they start just chronologically, or is there like a good starting point to kind of discover and explore?
Interesting, because each one is a separate game. You don't have to have played Final Fantasy II in order to understand what's going on in Final Fantasy III.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would... It depends on what you want to get out of it. If you want something that's kind of like a really riveting story, you might want to start with some of the later ones, 4, 5, or 6. But if you want something that's more like, ooh, I'm just exploring the world and I really want to find out what's going on in all of these places and just like talk to all the NPCs and that kind of thing, then I think 1 through 3 would be the most fun there.
Do you have to check on the localization with like the original founders and creators of the game? Do they need to approve things, or have they been kind of removed a little bit from that process and it's just entrusted into the Square Enix way of doing things?
Well, I know that there was certainly conversations going on between the devs, both old and new, in the background, but that was less on my end. I was doing less checking with any of the really important venerated people who made the original games. So not so much for me.
I see. Do you have a big team that you work with?
No.
Considering no.
Well, in the localization side, it was me as the lead, and I had a helpful assistant translator as well. And then I think I had 1 or 2 project managers to work with as well. And that was the whole localization team. Just that.
A lot of work for a small team.
Done worse.
And I imagine when you get to the end of it and you kind of submit the final version, it must be a sort of relief and also maybe a little bit of anticipation of what's going to be the fans' reaction.
A bit, I would say. Though, again, it's not quite the same as having a thing and then turning in the final product, because it really is going side by side with what's going on in the Japanese. So it didn't feel like there was aha, I've turned it in, now I'm done moment. Because once I finished a translation for a little bit or looked over a scene and submitted it, I still had to go and look at it in the ROM and make sure that it looked okay. I still had to wait and make sure that the QA people were okay with the way it looked. And then at the end, I had to do little PR blurbs and stuff afterward. And then it got released to the public and I got to see their reactions.
What was the reaction like? How was that experience for you?
So there were a couple things. I think overall, people seemed to enjoy the Pixel remasters, which was nice. But our biggest criticism when they first came out was people didn't like the font. that had been chosen. So
is this actually something that you kind of decide, or is this done
No.
in the creative department?
Well, for this particular project, I had not been in the conversation where we decided on the font. But for other projects, sometimes we are asked to give suggestions of fonts that would look good for the world. But people didn't really like it. It was legible, but it kind of wasn't very stylized to go with like the pixelated story. And so I understand the criticism there. But luckily, the game then came out for PC and got patched and such, and we gave them another font.
And then everyone was happy.
People liked that one better. So there's like a classic retro font as well as the newer font, and you can choose between the two.
Are there any other big franchises or particular projects that you really enjoyed working on at Square Enix?
All the Mana series. I absolutely love the Mana series. Trials of Mana, Secret of Mana, Visions of Mana, all the ones that I've been allowed to participate in. I love that series.
How different is it? So I don't know the series, but how different is it to work on that versus, for example, that Pixel Remastered from Final Fantasy?
Well, it's smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a niche group of fans that are interested in that series. It's but I think because of that, it's kind of a little homier. The fans are very tight-knit and really excited when anything comes out that has to do with the Mana series, and I like that attitude. I like how excited people get when they see something from a franchise that really doesn't get to see a whole lot of updates. Final Fantasies, you kind of get Final Fantasies every so often. Those come out a lot. Dragon Quest, those are pretty common, often get new releases, but the Mana series doesn't get very many.
When you work on a series like this that has a tight-knit community behind, do you as a lead localization lead get to, I don't know, on online forums, interact with the community and kind of maybe anonymously or not ask for the community's opinion on things? Or is this like a no-no?
I don't know exactly how okay it would be, but I haven't. I have avoided going onto forums. I think I worry that you don't want to get too close necessarily. If anything creative is going on, you don't want to accidentally listen to somebody's ideas and then be like, oh yeah, actually, and accidentally use that later on. So I think you do need to have like a little bit of space. Or at least I would recommend having like a little bit of space between the people working on the game and the people who enjoy the game, just for that kind of worry. So I personally have not interacted with the fans, but I know that they're out there, and I'll see fan art come up randomly online or at little events, little like doujin events here in Japan. People will have little like acrylic things that you can buy from the characters from the Mana series, and I'm just like, so cute.
Aside from the communities that are different and maybe your ability to have a little bit more of an impact on the localization of the Mana series, for example, are there like differences in how you actually localize in terms of the processes, the things you have to consider, or is localization, generally speaking, quite similar regardless of where and how you do this in terms of the processes?
I think the scale of the project does sometimes come into play. And also if it has a lot of legacy games behind it, that'll change the way that you work on the game. But I would also say that within the global production division at Square Enix, we do kind of have like a set start to it, where we'll start with familiarizing with the game and then move on to working on like the setting of the game and the names and stuff before moving on to the script, kind of at the same time that the Japanese side is developing it as well. So I would say that the processes tend to be similar.
How has the industry overall changed in the years that you've kind of worked in it? Have you noticed some trends in and how things work and what's being done and who's translating what?
Since I okay. So I would say that when I first started at Square Enix, I was working on several small projects. I felt like there were more smaller things that were coming out that we could kind of shift around to instead of just a few really big games going on, which I feel like these days there are more like big games that are coming out. And so there's fewer opportunities for us to kind of work on the smaller stuff because they need us to work on some of the bigger stuff more often these days.
So not so much about the industry itself, more the game industry at large, focusing more, and maybe in the case of Square Enix, on the bigger franchises and dedicating more resources to this.
Yeah, I think AAA games have become very large and they need really big teams. And so I feel like smaller games perhaps have less prominence these days. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily just in Square Enix either. The indie games are super big these days, but I would say that a lot of companies don't seem to be working on smaller games. Companies seem to be working on big games these days.
For you, localization is not the only thing you do.
No.
You briefly mentioned very early in our conversation that you kind of also like singing, and
Yes.
you have been working and doing a lot of voice work for the Final Fantasy franchise as well. I believe,
When I can.
When you can. Tell me a little bit about how you kind of got started with this. Was this after you joined Square Enix, or was it kind of always an ongoing kind of side project of yours to do vocal work?
So before I started at Square Enix, I have been singing basically since I was a kid. I was in a ton of choirs between elementary school, junior high, high school, all through then. My family's very musical. My dad's a music professor. So singing was something that I had always done and was already still involved in even when I started at Square Enix. As far as voice acting goes, I had kind of dabbled before I got to Square Enix. I'd done some indie games. I'd worked on some like audiobooks, but it was like few and far between. Just kind of when the occasion arose, I would volunteer because I really like doing voice acting and singing for that matter. But then once I started at Square Enix, that was where I got the opportunity to actually sing for games. And it was very just luck that got me there. Basically, an expansion for Final Fantasy XIV was in the works after I had joined Square Enix. I think it was not even a year after I had joined. And the then lead of the English team at the time was looking for internal people that would be able to sing in English for the game. As I understand, there was a bit of a time crunch. And so that's why they were like, is there anybody in the office that we can call on and ask? And that coworker knew that I had some singing ability. And so he asked if I would be interested in singing a song for the Stormblood expansion. Beauty's Wicked Wiles is what it's called. And I gave it a try, and they were okay enough with my performance that they asked me to come back and do it for other expansions as well afterward.
Wow. So right place, right time.
Right place, right time.
And I guess a good thing to be in-house and to kind of get these kind of opportunities.
Pure luck. Pure luck.
What's it like to kind of work and record a song like this for a video game? I imagine
besides fun.
Like practically speaking, how do you approach a project like this? It's probably different than just recording EP or something for a song you've wrote or you want to sing.
I haven't written any songs myself, sadly. But I mean, it's a video game song. And so you kind of have to know what's going on in the video game. The songs that I've sung for Final Fantasy XIV have all been boss battles where you're fighting against a specific, not bad guy necessarily, but adversary, shall we say. And then I got to sing for the backgrounds, basically. And each boss is different. They have different kind of quirks. They have different styles. The setting for each expansion is different. And so it's very, very fun. Just kind of hearing a little bit about the background of the bad guy that I'm singing for, and then getting to go in the booth with the people that wrote the lyrics for the song, as well as the writer of the song itself. And then they both of those people get to give me kind of like instructions as I go. I'll sing it through, and then they'll be like, all right, perfect, except in this bit, sound angrier, or this bit needs to be a little faster. And you get kind of that background as you go. And it's a very collaborative way to sing, and it's a ton of fun.
Do you get to play that scene where your song is going to be placed into beforehand, so you kind of get an idea of the interaction in game and the visuals as well?
They've given me images of the characters, the bosses, but I haven't actually gotten to play the game ahead of time.
I'm trying to imagine what it's like to kind of sing for this character or the kind of this background music. And the boss battle also may last longer or shorter depending on who's playing.
Yes.
Is this a consideration too? Like if, I don't know, the guy playing the hero is, instead of attacking, dodging and just drawing it out, like a song usually 3 minutes, how do you kind of approach that?
The writers of the songs are fantastic and have been doing this for years and are so professional, and they literally create songs that can be kind of looped, but that make sense in the way that they're looped. And sometimes they'll, play the song all the way through and then just repeat a little bit in the middle right afterward, and then go into another full loop of the thing. They figure it out on their end. The sound composers are absolutely amazing.
How much time do you get to practice beforehand and to kind of get ready?
Not much.
Not much?
That first one, I think I wasn't given the lyrics until maybe the day before.
Really?
I had been given like a little taste of what it was going to sound like with like a MIDI file, but I wasn't given the lyrics until like pretty much just before going in and doing it. I've had a little bit more lead up time for some of the other ones that I've worked on, but it tends to be pretty fast.
The day before doesn't really give you any room for, I don't know, getting into the mindset or even knowing the lyrics to know when and how to place intonations in. Luckily,
that's why they like to have the person who wrote the lyrics actually be there in kind of the controller booth. I'll be in like the sound booth and they'll be next door. And so if I'm doing something that they're like, no, that's not quite what we're going for, then they're able to quickly tell me like, now actually what I was envisioning for this is this. So that it's very helpful to have basically a voice director for singing.
You mentioned that you kind of grew up in a musical family and always did something and such, but being in the booth and kind of being told to sing on command is a different kind of skill that usually people need to practice for. How was that experience for you? Were you able to just adjust? Is it something that you had basically gathered enough experience for before, or was it like a challenge?
So it was pretty challenging up until doing these songs. I had really only performed in like choirs. So I wasn't really used to singing solo, let alone singing game music. So I would say that the first one especially, I was very nervous, and I'm really glad I did good enough that they called me back. But I was very like, I hope this is what you want. I hope I did something good enough. And I guess I did. But I had no idea whether it was good enough at the time.
But that eventually led to also be voice director for the Visions of Mana game. How do you approach this kind of new role where you basically in charge, I imagine, of a lot of the vocals throughout the game, as well as the localization?
So I actually did get to do some voice direction assistance on other Mana projects as well. That's kind of part and parcel of what the in-house localization teams get to do. We are in charge of both the script as well as the recording. It's not always in a full direction position. Usually we are assistants. We'll be there for every recording. We'll work with the voice director and the cast and kind of collaboratively come up with what we want the voiceover to sound like. So I had started with that early on with other Mana games as well. I think actually I might have done that Final Fantasy XIV, the first song first. And then I moved on and did the assistant voice directing for Mana games. But since that first one, I got to play kind of a more active role where I would take over full sessions of voice directing. But we also did have other voice directors based in LA to help us out as well. And that's usually the case. It's usually a mixture of the people who have worked on the script, as well as a professional voice director, as well as the talent and the engineers at the studio. And we're all kind of working together to make the voiceover.
Between both responsibilities, you're working with a lot of teams across multiple departments on multiple aspects of the game.
Yes.
For people that are interested in kind of getting into that industry, whether it's localization or the voice side of things, what do kind of careers look like? What are the entry points? What are the prospects for development that people may expect when they, or that they could expect if they kind of apply for a job at Square Enix or general localization companies?
I mean, for Square Enix in particular, they really did want people working in-house who have a lot of experience doing a lot of different things. Like, we've got people from everywhere, from a ton of different backgrounds, medical backgrounds, university teachers, translators, etc. Just like little bits of everything. We've got singers, we've got actors, we've got a little bit of everything. And you can kind of find ways to bring the things that you do well into your translations or various other parts of the process of the localization, I feel, at least.
You mentioned earlier that you got your first job, or the company that gave you your first job in localization kind of gave you a chance because you had passed N1, amongst other skills you had at the time. How important is kind of good understanding and good language ability of Japanese in localization versus good mastery of more like kind of your own language in a way, and ability to translate things or to find the right words and such? I
think that's one of those other misconceptions personally. For writing for media, writing for entertainment purposes, a lot of people would think that what you need is to be the best at Japanese. Like you need a ton of Japanese ability to be able to do this. And that's not wrong. You do have to understand what it is that is happening and going on in all of the scripts that you're working on. But personally, in my experience, I believe that creative writing in your own native language is much more important. You find a lot of people that are very good at understanding Japanese, but maybe aren't as good at being able to convey that in a natural sounding way in writing or spoken. And so that's the skill that I think is hardest to find and the most utilized, at least in my department.
So looking ahead, what are kind of the projects that you're hoping to work for in the future? If you could, I'd like to work on this game or this kind of project. since you are kind of now having already a pretty extensive experience in the industry?
I mean, I like doing what I'm doing. I'd like to keep doing more of what I'm doing. I think the only thing that I really want to do more of that I don't always get the chance to do is more of the singing. I really, really like being able to sing for video games or anything really. And unfortunately, I am very busy with a bunch of other stuff as well. And I feel like the opportunity doesn't come up too often. So hopefully in the future, I will be able to do more singing.
More singing. Maybe we'll be able to listen to you, your list of credits expand, whether it's on video games or your personal projects. Paula, we talked about quite a lot of things. We approached some of the misconceptions people had about the industry. You gave us like a really interesting insight into what's it actually like to translate some of those games, recording some of the voices and such. Are there any topics that we didn't really get into that you would have liked to bring up about the industry and the work you do?
Probably, but can I think of them?
You probably will once we stop recording. This is what often happens. The curse.
See.
Are there any other misconceptions that maybe we haven't approached that you frequently notice online or people ask you about? That you're like, no, this is actually not what localization is like or what it is about.
I think I already talked about it a little bit, but I think the misconception that we, as translators of the games, are not correctly conveying the visions of the developers who are creating the games. I think that some people think that we're just kind of going off on our own and doing whatever we want to with the script, but it really, really is a collaborative process. At the very least, in the teams that I've been in, it's very much you're checking in with the developers as they're developing the game. You're literally working side by side, doing things at exactly the same time. You're asking them like for insight on why they decided to write a scene a certain way. And you're getting feedback on, hey, I wanted to name this thing. Do you mind if I change it a little bit to this? Because I think it has a better ring to it in English. And getting that constant feedback and checking in and really working together with the people that are actually creating the other pieces of the game.
Well, that actually brings up another question. I imagine or assume that a lot of the developers may be Japanese and
at least at Square Enix, yes.
And may not speak, or perhaps they speak English, but maybe not all the other foreign languages. How do you explain to them your choices for the translations? To kind of, this is why I've chosen to do it this way. Is it okay with you? But like, if that person cannot understand or kind of
right. I mean, we just do it in Japanese. We do our level best. We work together with the project managers as well, too, to try to bring up our concerns about various names or whatever that we're trying to double check. And it really is just, you have to kind of write a wall of text trying to explain why the Japanese doesn't quite match what they're intending for if we put it into English the same way, and you just write it all in Japanese and hope. Or, sometimes you have to have additional meetings with the developers to kind of further explain where you're coming from. But luckily, we work together, so we often have that opportunity to double check.
So at Square Enix, it's a very collaborative effort.
Yes.
And people, when they see the next maybe Final Fantasy game come out, they can know or rest assured that both the localization team, the developers, and many more have worked together on this, and the choices have been kind of thought through and still open for adjustments with updates from the game, I imagine, DLCs and whatnot. That was super interesting to kind of hear more about that. And we kind of left off a little bit at your personal journey, kind of arriving to Tokyo and diving into this. But how, looking back at your experience in Japan, do you feel like you kind of found what you were looking for as a kid here and that industry and translating and living in Tokyo?
I mean, simple answer is yes. I feel so lucky to have found the job that I have, to have found the people that I am friends with. I met my wife here. We live here. We have 7 cats here. I got permanent residence, and I don't plan on leaving ever. And I just really enjoy my time and what I am able to do. And I feel like the skills that I'm still working on every day are being utilized in a way that is really fulfilling. I can sing sometimes, I can voice act sometimes, I can voice direct, and I get to translate, and I'm very content.
And the language is still very much
and the language is a part of all of that, really. So
Paula, thank you so much for coming and sharing your perspectives and your experience. It was super nice to have you. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Wow. It's not an easy job.
No.
Thank you for sticking with us all the way till the end. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the podcast. It helps us improve the show and bring you more in-depth conversations from Japan. Take care and see you next time.